Hello everyone and welcome back to Game Dive. Today I decided to revisit my original Shinobi video with a quick dive covering the game's characters, lore, and each of its stages. After playing this game in my youth, I'm excited to return to see whether I can finally put it to rest. So without further ado, let's dive in. The game begins with a flashback to a duel between two brothers, Hotsuma, the younger black-haired brother, and Moritsune, his older white-haired sibling. Both belong to the Oboro Clan, an elite sect of ninjas. The purpose of this duel is to determine which brother will become the clan's next leader, but under Oboro law, only the one who survives can claim the title. The duel is overseen by Master Kabushi, the brother's mentor and foster father, along with the Geha, Kunoichi, who grew up alongside them. Although a Geha wishes she could stop the brothers from killing each other, Master Kabushi reminds her that the laws of the Oboro clan must be upheld above all else. The duel begins with both brothers displaying the extraordinary skills they've honed over the years of training. But just before we can witness the final blow, the flashback comes to an end. Four years later, a mysterious golden palace appears in the heart of Tokyo. At the same time, monstrous creatures known as Hellspawn flood the streets, slaughtering anyone unfortunate enough to cross their path. Behind the attack is Hiruko, a powerful Onmyoji responsible for massacring the Oboro clan and resurrecting its fallen members. After learning of his clan's demise and the appearance of the Golden Palace, Hotsuma makes his way into the city aboard a helicopter. Before the helicopter can reach its destination, however, it comes under attack by the Hellspawn. Hotsuma leaps out moments before the helicopter is destroyed, and as he plummets towards the streets below, he spots a mysterious figure watching him. By the time he lands, the figure has vanished. Soon after, Hotsuma is attacked by the reanimated corpses of the former Oboro clan members. He quickly dispatches them and recognizes the talismans used to resurrect their bodies, the unmistakable work of the man who slaughtered his clan. And with that, Hotsuma's quest for revenge begins. Stage 1. Now the game doesn't have a traditional tutorial, instead it throws you straight into the action, leaving you with little guidance outside of the instruction manual. The controls are simple enough. Circle jumps, X performs a stealth dash, square attacks, and triangle throws shurikens. R1 locks on enemies while L2 activates your selected ninjutsu. Pressing left or right on the D-pad cycles through three forms of ninjutsu. One creates a powerful AoE explosion, another adds ranged projectiles to your attack, and the third surrounds Hotsuma with a temporary shield protecting him until its duration expires or it absorbs a limited number of hits. You can also perform a shuriken burst by double jumping and pressing triangle, causing Hotsuma to unleash a spread of shurikens at the enemies around him. One important tip is that the shurikens can stun, leaving them open to attack. This even works against certain bosses, particularly the more humanoid ones, while larger, more demonic bosses are generally immune to these. The game encourages a pretty aggressive playstyle. Since there's no block button, you have to rely on jumping and stealth dashing to avoid attacks and maneuver behind enemies. Strike their weak points. Finding, jumping, dashing, and attacking is really important during combat encounters. A row of orbs will appear in the upper right corner of the screen. Each time you defeat an enemy, one of these orbs light up. However, defeated enemies don't collapse immediately. They remain frozen in place until a short window expires or you eliminate every enemy in the group. They are then cut down simultaneously, rewarding you for completing the sequence. The final mechanic in Hotsuma's arsenal is wall running. You'll use it frequently throughout the game stages to cross gaps, avoid traps, and overcome the various obstacles standing in your way. Now that we've covered the basic mechanics, let's move on to the enemies. Throughout the first stage, you'll face several different types, including dogs, undead ninjas from the Oboro clan, flying hellspawn, and even demonically possessed tanks. not too hard to deal with, and they make good practice for chaining your kills. After slashing your way through the first stage, you encounter the game's first boss, a possessed helicopter. Its attacks include sweeping the area with machine gun fire, launching rockets, and descending towards the ground in an attempt to ram into you. It also summons basic enemies throughout the fight, but honestly those guys aren't much of a problem. In fact, you can ignore most of the boss's mechanics simply by standing underneath it and repeatedly using jump attacks. As the fight ends, Ageha shows up, throwing a shuriken at the retreating boss and pretending like she actually contributed. The two briefly discuss Hotsuma's position as the leader of a now dead clan, as well as the fact that Ageha has abandoned the Oboro and has become a rogue ninja. Hotsuma then makes it clear that he intends to avenge his clan, that he has no need for help. Afterwards, we return to the flashback of the brothers' duel, this time witnessing its conclusion. Hotsuma emerges victorious and Moritsune accepts his defeat. He tells Hotsuma to take up his sword, the Akujiki, and fulfill the clan's law. After sharing his final words, Moritsune closes his eyes and Hotsuma reluctantly ends his brother's life. Stage 1B has you running across the rooftops of the city. You'll encounter many of the same enemies from the first level, along with some wall-clinging kunoichi, and a floating stone pillar that you must destroy to open the path forward. Wall running also becomes far more important here, as you'll need it to constantly navigate between buildings. Now, missing a jump here means instant death, and since this game has no checkpoints, dying sends you all the way back to the beginning of the stage. So if you were to reach the final area and accidentally fall at the very end, not that I'm speaking from experience or anything, you'll have to start the entire level over again. Upon reaching the end of the stage, you are greeted by the next boss, Hotsuma's resurrected brother, Moritsune. As the two come face to face, Akujiki reacts to the scar it once left upon its former master. So Moritsune has a charging attack, and the rooftop arena makes it incredibly easy to exploit. Simply stand near the edge, bait him into charging, and jump over it. If he flies off the building, he'll take a massive amount of damage. Honestly, that's pretty much all you need to do. He does summon adds, so be sure to watch out for him while you take them down. Once he reaches his final bit of health, he'll become immune to fall damage. Lock onto him, hold back, and press the attack button to perform a kick. This breaks his guard and leaves him vulnerable, allowing you to land the final blow. After the fight, the brothers clash one final time, awakening Akujiki's true power. Sword comes to life, Moritsune retreats. The next stage begins with a flashback to Moritsune, Hotsuma, and Ageha as children. The three sneak into a chamber where Akujiki is kept, hoping to get a closer look at the legendary sword. But when Ageha picks it up, Akujiki suddenly awakens. After the flashback, Akujiki awakens in the present, flying around uncontrollably until Hotsuma manages to catch it. We then learn that Akujiki is a cursed blade that feeds on yin energy. If it goes too long without being fed, the sword will begin to consume the soul of its wielder. Fortunately, the yin energy of the Hellspawn is enough to satisfy Akujiki's hunger, at least for the time being. Stage 2A is where the game really starts to pick up, not only with the introduction of new enemy types, but also a new mechanic. Your health bar is now accompanied by a Magatama gauge representing Akujiki's hunger. The longer the sword goes without feeding on defeated enemies, the more the gauge drains. Once it is completely empty, Akujiki begins to consume Hotsuma's health instead. While this mechanic comes with a serious drawback, it also provides one of the game's biggest advantages. Each kill you secure during a chain temporarily increases Akujiki's power. After the first kill, the blade glows blue to indicate the first damage boost. At 4 kills, it turns purple, and after 6, it glows orange, increasing the power tremendously. You won't reach the orange stage very often, but you usually won't need to. The purple boost alone is powerful enough to cut down most large enemies without much trouble. Upon reaching the end of the stage, Hotsuma is confronted by Shirogane and Akagane, two former students whom he personally trained. Unable to control their resurrected bodies, they plead with their old master to kill them and finally end their suffering. During the fight, Akagane the girl pressures you with close-range melee attacks, while Shirogane the boy uses a weighted chain to attack from a distance. I found it more effective to focus on Shirogane first. Whenever he takes damage, he tends to roll away, and constantly chasing him naturally keeps you out of the range of Akagane's attack. If you can force him into a corner, you can briefly stun lock him and deal a significant amount of damage. Basic enemies also spawn throughout the battle, but this time they can actually work to your advantage. Chaining kills against him increases Akujiki's power, allowing you to deal far more damage to both bosses and finish the fight much faster. Upon their defeat, Akujiki absorbs their yin energy, finally freeing the two students from their torment and allowing them to rest in peace. Stage 2B is mostly the same, though it introduces a new ninja type. These ninjas can block your attacks, so you'll need to use your stealth dashes and jumping attacks to get behind them, or break through their guard with a well-placed kick. Upon reaching the main courtyard, Ageha discovers an injured Master Kabushi. Not long afterwards, they are attacked by the helicopter you defeated earlier. Only now, it is returned in a far more demonic form. Although its appearance may have changed, the same strategy you used before works just as well. Stay underneath it and continue using jump attacks. Better yet, the enemies it summons now gives you opportunities to strengthen Akujiki, allowing you to deal even more damage and finish the rematch much faster. Afterwards, we learn more about Hiruko. Years prior, the sorcerer attempted to engulf the world in darkness by performing a forbidden ritual. The Oboro Clan managed to stop him, sealing him deep within Kumano's shrine. Now, someone has broken the seal, freeing Hiruko to attempt the ritual once again. Master Kabushi came to the shrine hoping to discover who was responsible. Instead, he found that the guardian of the shrine has been kidnapped. It was going to be used as sacrifice for Hiruko's ritual. Upon finding out the guardian's location, Hotsuma sets off to rescue them. And not long after Hotsuma's departure, Master Kabushi passes away. Now, the next stage takes us into an underground area. The most notable enemies here are these incredibly annoying dogs. They attack in packs and can block anything aimed at them from the front, making them by far some of the most frustrating enemies in the entire game. Fortunately, you can bypass many of the encounters in this area. The only fights you actually need to complete are the ones that open the gates blocking the path forward. The next boss is Hakuraku, a veteran medical ninja of the Oboro Clan who trained its ninja dogs for combat. His strategy mostly consists of summoning those dogs and then running away while they fight for him. Chaining kills against the dogs will strengthen Akujiki, allowing you to deal massive damage whenever you reach Hakuraku. After being hit, however, he will teleport away and summon another pack to protect himself. He will eventually attempt to heal, but you can interrupt him. Even with his healing abilities, Akujiki in its second stage can overwhelm the amount he can recover. The good news is, once he's taken down, you won't have to deal with the ninja dogs anymore from here on out. The next stage introduces spider-like enemies, which are thankfully much easier to deal with than the ninja dogs. The real challenge is navigating the stage itself, as many of the hallways look almost identical. Fortunately, there's a simple way to tell whether you're heading in the right direction. Enemies are still spawning, you're probably on the correct path. Waiting at the end of the stage is Shirokuma, a giant tarantula with the head of a tiger. Despite its intimidating appearance, you can handle it like most of the previous bosses. Attack it until it summons additional enemies, chain those enemies together to strengthen Akujiki, and then use the damage boost to tear through Shirokuma's health. After defeating Shirokuma, Hotsuma discovers the Shrine Guardian trapped in one of his cocoons. Before he can rescue her, however, a swarm of flaming moths appear and carries her away. The next stage takes place in a town engulfed in flames. Here you will encounter these moths that can fire projectiles at a distance, and once they start to glow, they will try to charge at you. Fortunately, they're extremely fragile and can be taken out with little effort. You will also face red ninjas, who much like the ones you encountered earlier can block attacks from the front. However, they can also perform jumping attacks, making them slightly more aggressive and unpredictable. The stage also contains several pools of lavas that you can fall into. Unlike the previous stages, you won't die instantly, but they will inflict a small amount of burn damage to you. This boss fight pits you against Homura, a fire-wielding ninja who considers Hotsuma his rival. The battle is fairly short, with Homura repeatedly teleporting away, firing explosive projectiles from a distance and summoning additional enemies to keep you occupied. And thanks to those enemies that he summons, you make quick work of him. At the end of the fight, rather than allowing Hotsuma to deliver the final blow, Homura chooses to take his own life. The next stage takes you to a more platforming focused area, where the greatest danger is falling into the lava. The enemies will remain mostly the same, so the main challenge comes from navigating the environment. Essentially, it's the previous stage with a lot more lava. The next boss is Binusuzumi, a giant moth with the face and upper body of a geisha. The fight itself can be a little rough. The central platform is surrounded by lava, while Binusuzumi flies around the outer edges of the arena. To reach her, you will need to wall run along the sides and strike her in midair. After taking roughly 4 hits, she will eventually summon additional enemies near the center. I found it best to avoid them at first and wait for their charging attacks to bring them closer together. Once they're grouped up, chain enough kills to make Akujiki glow purple, then use the damage boost against Suzumi. Whenever she takes a hit, she flies across the arena while launching an attack at the central platform. Don't rush back immediately, wait until she reaches the opposite side and her attack has passed before returning. After defeating Suzumi, Hotsuma finally rescues the Guardian. However, the dying boss makes one last attempt to blow them up. After they escape, the Shrine Guardian awakens and immediately recognizes Akujiki, confirming Hotsuma's identity as the leader of the Oboro Clan. She introduces herself as Kagari Ubusuna, heir to the Ubusuna family, whose duty was to guard the temple and ensure that Hiruko remained sealed away. Kagari tells Hotsuma that Hiruko plans to awaken a powerful weapon known as Yatsuro, using the spirits of the people who died in the earthquake to fuel it. To complete the ritual, Kagari herself must be offered as a sacrifice. Before she can explain any further, a massive torrent of water tears through the area and separates them. During the chaos, Kagari is kidnapped yet again. At this point, getting captured has pretty much been this girl's entire day, and the day isn't even over yet. This stage takes you across another series of rooftops. Only now, a raging torrent of water flows beneath you. The enemies are tougher this time around, including a new type of flying ninja. As you progress, the water periodically recedes, revealing platforms and pathways below. Just be careful not to linger too long, because the water will eventually rise again, and if it reaches you, you die instantly. The stage can be pretty lengthy, and it might be best to take your time with it, unless you want to be sent back to the beginning of the stage. No, not speaking from experience. Upon reaching the end of the stage and finally locating Kagari, Hotsuma is confronted by Kongo, the powerhouse of the Oboro Clan. Although his resurrected body is no longer under his control, Kongo still looks forward to the opportunity to test his strength against Hotsuma. This fight is surprisingly easy because you can pretty much bully him. Shurikens will stun him, making it possible to lock him into repeated attacks with little chance to fight back. If he summons additional enemies, he only makes the situation worse for himself, since you can chain them together and strengthen Akujiki and end the battle even faster. Even though Kongo loses the battle, he dies satisfied, grateful for the chance to fight Hotsuma one last time. Afterward, Kagari decides that it may be better to die than risk being used to complete Hiruko's ritual. He asks Hotsuma to kill her, but the request reminds him at the moment he was forced to take his brother's life. Unable to repeat the tragedy, Hotsuma refuses, declaring that he came for Hiruko and has no intentions of killing anyone else. And just like clockwork, Kagari is kidnapped yet again. This time by Kurakuda, one of the 4 Hellspawn Lords. He has the upper body of a man wearing a fox mask and a lower body of a massive snake, complete with a second snake head at the end of the tail. The next stage throws you into a boss fight against him. His main ability allows him to teleport in and out of the arena. If he reappears near you, the teleport itself will deal damage, and he'll follow it by firing a beam in whatever direction he's facing. After taking enough damage, Kurakuda will begin to summon a group of snakes. I found it best to kite them around the arena until he starts charging his beam. About halfway through the attack, begin chaining the snakes together to strengthen Akujiki, then use the damage boost to land a powerful hit on Kurakuda. After Kurakuda is defeated, Moritsune appears just long enough to distract Hotsuma while Kagari is kidnapped yet again. Ageha then shows up out of nowhere and reveals where she's been taken to, the Nakatomi factory, where Hiruko's forces are rebuilding Yatsuro. The next stage takes you through a series of Resident Evil style hallways filled with lasers. Fortunately, you can avoid them by either jumping over them or getting close enough to dash straight through them. Various enemies are scattered throughout the area, but most can be ignored since the blocked pathways are opened by destroying the stone pillars rather than clearing every encounter. And most likely the greatest danger here is simply just falling into that pit of mysterious liquid below. After making your way through the facility, you encounter the next obstacle standing in your way, Kazami, a veteran ninja of the Oboro Clan. I used the walls to close the gap before throwing a shuriken to stun him, then moving in for a quick attack, and then immediately retreating back to the wall. Repeating the process until additional enemies begin filling the room, chaining them together to strengthen the sword, then using the damage boost to land a devastating strike on Kazami. Whenever possible, aim for his back to maximize your damage. With his final words, Kazami expresses his belief that Hotsuma will be the one to finally put an end to Hiruko. The next stage brings Hotsuma face to face with Hiruko, the man responsible for the destruction of the Oboro Clan. Hiruko reveals that 72 years earlier the clan defeated and sealed away Yatsuro. Now he intends to sacrifice Kagari to resurrect the ancient weapon, and with that, he unleashes Yatsuro upon Hotsuma. The fight took me a while to wrap my head around. Yatsuro has multiple arms that are constantly swinging around the arena, and although he summons additional adds, his attacks can't kill them before you have a chance to build a chain and strengthen your sword. But then after a few attempts this happened, he stopped doing anything. He summoned the adds and just stood there and let me kill him. It was a pretty anticlimactic end for an ancient weapon that the game had spent so much of its time building up, but hey, I'll take the win. After Hotsuma defeats Yatsuro and rescues Kagari, Hiruko reveals his true plan. He wanted Hotsuma to destroy Yatsuro so that he could absorb the creature's spirit, along with the yin energy of the countless souls lost throughout the city. Hiruko consumes all that power, restoring his youth and transforming himself into an even greater threat. As Hotsuma attempts to stop Hiruko, Moritsune intervenes and blocks his attack. Hiruko and Moritsune then make their escape, but not before inviting Hotsuma to follow them to Kanai's shrine if he wants to settle things once and for all. The next flashback continues the story of their childhood. Moritsune manages to save Ageha from Akujiki, but the encounter leaves him with a scar across his face and the burden of becoming the sword's new wielder. As Hotsuma makes his way through the shrine, he encounters stronger, more aggressive variants of enemies from earlier stages. Many of them can survive several attacks, making them much harder to kill. Chaining them together remains the most effective strategy. At the end of the stage, Hotsuma finds Ageha waiting for him. He reveals that she was the one who broke Hiruko's seal, believing he could resurrect Moritsune. She also explains that the true purpose of the brothers' duel, it was never simply about choosing the Oboro Clan's next leader. Moritsune was sacrificed to feed his spirit to the Akujiki to keep the cursed blade suppressed. Everything Ageha has done was driven by her desire to save Moritsune, just as he once saved her during their childhood. Ageha can be pretty rough to deal with. Whenever she dashes, she's behind a shadow clone that steals your lock-on, making her difficult to track. She can also enter a stance before lunging towards you, leap into the air to throw shurikens and stun you with her projectiles. I found it best to remain airborne and rely heavily on jumping attacks until she begins summoning additional enemies. Once they appear, chain them together, then become aggressive and finish her before she can get control of the fight. At the end of the fight, Ageha retreats. The next scene brings their childhood flashback to its conclusion. When Ageha finds herself unable to release Akujiki, Moritsune sacrifices a piece of his soul to free her from the sword's grasp. Ageha returns to Hiruko, hoping she delayed Hotsuma long enough for him to complete the ritual and resurrect Moritsune. Hiruko claims that the ritual was successful, and Ageha rushes forward to embrace the man she sacrificed everything to save. Without warning, Moritsune strikes her down. Only then does the truth become clear. The ritual didn't truly restore Moritsune. Hiruko resurrected his body only so it could serve as a vessel for Aomizuchi, one of the 4 Hellspawn Lords. Like Ageha, Aomizuchi leaves behind clones whenever he dashes. However, his dashes are usually followed by an immediate attack, so whenever you see him move, jump out of the way before rushing back in to continue your assault. He's actually a little easier to deal with than Ageha. The same general strategy works against him. His additional adds do spawn a little slower, but once enough appear to push Akujiki into its purple state, the fight is pretty much over. Upon his defeat, Aomizuchi is expelled from Moritsune's body, finally freeing him from the Hellspawn's control. In his final moments, Moritsune tells Hotsuma that his spirit has always lived within Akujiki, and that through the blade, he has remained by his brother's side all along. Moritsune then takes Ageha with him, allowing the two to finally be together in the afterlife. Moritsune finally laid to rest, Hotsuma makes his way to the Golden Palace. Hiruko gathers the countless souls harvested throughout the city within the Golden Palace. One final piece remains, Hotsuma and Akujiki. With everything now in place, Hotsuma enters the palace for his final confrontation with Hiruko. The stage involves a lot of wall running and platforming, and sometimes it's better to avoid enemies altogether. It's also a fairly long segment, so one small mistake can cost you quite a bit of progress. Most of the enemies on the stage are flying enemies, with the occasional big guy wielding a steel beam. Once you finally reach the end, however, there isn't really a boss waiting for you. Instead, a health bar appears alongside a group of enemies. At first, I assumed the larger enemy that spawned had suddenly been promoted to boss status, even though I already fought him several times before. I cleared out the additional enemies, hit the big guy twice and he died, but the health bar was still there. I then locked onto the door, hit it twice, and the entire health bar disappeared. So yeah, the boss was a door. I don't know what else to tell you, it was a door with a health bar. That was the end of the stage. The next area takes you through a series of hallways and enclosed rooms. These smaller spaces make enemy encounters more difficult, since their attacks become harder to predict and avoid. There are also a few platforming sections mixed in to break things. Healing opportunities are limited here, so it's best to avoid unnecessary fights and only engage when you need to. You won't be able to bypass every encounter though. Upon reaching the end, Hotsuma is greeted by Hiruko, who finally reveals the full extent of his plan. Unleashing the Hellspawn upon Tokyo and resurrecting the Oboro Clan were all meant to push Hotsuma into cutting his way through the city, gathering countless souls within Akujiki. Hiruko claims that those souls have now merged inside the blade, and with their burning hatred for him, they will give birth to a single perfect soul. By claiming that power for himself, Hiruko intends to become the true ruler of the world.
Is that all you have left to say? If you want this life I threw away when I killed my brother, you can have it. However, I shall destroy you along with this accursed blade!
And with that, the final confrontation begins. This fight can be pretty challenging. Hiruko can cast a variety of spells, so listening to his audio cues is essential for anticipating his next attack. He is completely immune to damage while casting. Once he finishes, he will block any attack aimed at him from the front. Whenever you approach him on the ground, open with a kick and break his guard before attacking. However, if Hiruko finishes casting while airborne, he won't block your attacks, giving you an opportunity to strike immediately. He will also occasionally teleport directly towards you and unleash a lengthy combo. Constantly dashing and changing direction will help you avoid most of it. Hiruko also summons a group of talisman-like enemies throughout the fight. My biggest issue was trying to chain enough of them together to push Akujiki into its purple power stage. By the time I built up the boost and reached Hiruko, he would often become invulnerable and begin casting another spell, wasting most of the opportunity. Thankfully, the talismans can drop health when defeated, which makes them extremely useful for surviving the longer fight. I ended up taking this fight fairly slowly. Rather than trying to push Akujiki into its purple stage, I would build enough power to reach the blue stage and use the smaller boost to attack Hiruko whenever an opening appeared. It was essentially a death by 1,000 cut strategy, but it eventually got the job done. At the end of the fight, Hiruko's soul is devoured by Akujiki. With his death, the Golden Palace begins to collapse, finally bringing his grand scheme to an end and saving Tokyo. And with that, I can finally put Shinobi to rest. We can assume that Hotsuma shattered Akujiki sometime afterwards because in the sequel Nightshade, the new protagonist travels around collecting the blade's scattered fragments. I'd love to revisit that game at some point, but for now, I'm just happy to be finished with this one. As challenging as Shinobi was, and believe me it was, it feels amazing to finally put it to bed. I'm incredibly satisfied and I hope you guys enjoyed coming along for the ride. If you did, feel free to like, favorite, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments whether you had as much trouble getting through this game as I did. Anyway, this has been Game Dive. Till next time.